There's my assistant tour director, my wife, Evelyn. We all having fun? And what is our tour guide's name?
Brian Torres.
Brian Torres. Okay. All right. Awesome.
Fishing? This area. Now also you can walk around anywhere around the boat during the tour, and if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to ask. My name is Brian Torres. The body of water that we are in. What we are in, this is all a natural bayou. Now in this area we have a total of 8 miles of bayou, and at each end of the bayou we have a lake that will eventually lead you into larger or smaller channels of water. The two lakes we have in this area are a lake above, which is 7 miles in front of us, and a lake the Salmons, which is only 1 mile in back of us. Traveling through Lake the Salmons and continuously into other larger channels of water, this will lead you all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. From here, we're about 70 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. We're looking at probably a good 12-hour drive, somehow a good full-day drive to get through all the bayous and lakes to get to the Gulf. Feet of water, depending on the wind and the rain, anywhere from 18 to 20 feet. The reason for this will be the wind will be about 10 degrees, always warmer than the air temperature. During the summer, it's almost opposite. The air temperature is much warmer than the water temperature. In the summer, you would see them out on uprooted trees or just on hills of dirt, and also just in the water with their backs sticking out. We should get to see how it's say an average of about 5 out here. But right now, within the last about 2-3 weeks, they have just started to come out of hibernation. All of these small points of wood sticking out of the water surrounding the tree. This tree is the most plentiful throughout the world is in this area. It's in a 25-mile radius of Thibodeau. Thibodeau is about 22 miles from here. Now, this tree many of years ago and still today, what it will be used for is for building houses, furniture and homes, and also any types of boats. What will happen with the wood from this tree, once you build anything, it's maintenance free. It will never rot away like your other types of trees. Something that could harm it will be termites. Termites can get to this tree here, the same as for other types. Homes. Here in Louisiana, it's now illegal to cut down the roots. The tree can be harvested, but no longer the roots. Here, your cypress may only be harvested an average of once every 15 or 20 years, that's all. It's not even a yearly occurrence. The reason for this will be the landowners will wait until the trees reach a certain size and age before they cut them down. From this town, and all of this swamp on the left side, from one lake to the next, would all be owned by one lumber company from New Orleans. But again, this is all, yes sir, all private. The water here? Well, here, not the water. The bayou area is red. Here we have, in fact, it's throughout Louisiana and in many other. This would be a non-poisonous.
Is that ice right there?
This
Go a little farther. We don't want them to jump up here. Like the one that we saw on base.
Plenty of them along the way on a sunny day. It's very
see it, Gary?
And that's called what again?
Here, yes sir, this would be, I would say, one of our 2 most common. Check on the left side of the bayou on some branches in the water. This is an area where we see these green leaf branches and different things piled up over the water. This is an area where we sometimes will see a few snakes sunning themselves. Did you get the snake out of the film? What happens is they're seasonal. This is something that's considered seasonal as far as to when you see them, the same as for an alligator. The reason for this will be snakes will also hibernate. Snakes hibernate. Part of the bark of the tree, lower through the water, we can see a small painted turtle, or also what is known as a Mobian turtle. The reason why the turtle is sometimes, and even quite often, called a painted turtle is for the reason of the red stripe that it has on on each side of its little small one here. Just a few more. Three of them. There's four. There's one more off to the right. Approaching. Everyone. Look on the back side of alligator would be, this would be close to about a 5-foot alligator because part of its tail is below the water. Cats. This is what the purpose of trapping them is for the fur. Except beaver. Beaver, unfortunately, not in this town. We have them in other surrounding towns, but not in this one. But again, to compare the nutria to beaver, they're basically identical except for the tail. They have a round tail, the nutria, beaver flat. Right. Yeah, so essentially where you're right there. Oh, okay, this is the new leaves of the red swamp maple.
Oh, there it is.
About a year and a half old.
I don't think he'd show up.
In other words, an alligator,
It's a baby.
when it grows out in captivity, and that's such as a farm, there's a big difference on the ground. Here I will point out another snowy egret in the back right of the book. It's a little difficult to see now.
Snowy egret.
Oh, yeah.
Now, after the cypress trees were cut down very deep into the swamp, they used the channel of water to float them out of the canal, out of the swamp, and then eventually through the bayous in front of us, all the way to where at the time they had a sawmill. Now there's no longer any sawmill in the bayou. What has happened here is you can see how the wind has uprooted trees to where the channel of water is almost completely closed up. It's very narrow right now. And what happens when you have unused channel of water, it slowly becomes very shallow and fills in with dirt. The depth of the water in there presently would be maybe 3 to 4 foot of water. The depth of mud that you'd be walking through. Here, the safest way, the more common way to see people walking in here is by wearing rubber hip boots. You know, even if a snake strikes at you, this will protect you by wearing your boots. It would take a very large snake to penetrate through the boot with your clothing to get to your skin also. What will happen is on a warm day, these snakes will come out of hibernation and they come out during the winter months on the dry, clean, as many a turtle as normal. Should also very shortly be uprooted red swamp maple tree. This is the roots of the tree we're seeing here. This would be a common area to see snakes hibernating. If you come here during the winter months and start poking around with something in the roots of the tree, chances are snakes would fall out of it. That's one reason why also you would not want to sit near something like this or walk near it during the winter months. Buy that market for a food place to buy it, you'd be advised at $9 a pound. Yeah, see?
Is it like little house here over there?
Last year, I should say, was
I gotta say something to the other place we're going
per
to.
foot. Every 12 inches of alligator
I'll buy some more film.
we're handing $67 a foot.
Wow. That's square foot?
That's a linear foot. Linear foot. The alligator skin, the length, in other words, the minimum size, the smallest alligator you can kill in Louisiana is a 4 feet in length. Something like we've seen but an uprooted tree would be perfectly legal to kill. You wouldn't get very much meat out of it because an alligator that size would weigh on average of about 50 pounds. What do you do? Here what we're seeing is the nutria. This is what I was mentioning earlier. This is the nutria. Yes, ma'am. Swimming around, probably looking for something to eat. Now, the nutria, their source of food is strictly vegetation. No type of meat. With alligators,
Vegetarian.
It's opposite. Alligators, it's meat, no vegetation.
Ah, he hit back there.
And hide behind us in that hollowed out root. And when it needs some roots. It's still here. You can see some movement through the water, through the opening of the trees. It's hiding on the backside of this root. Now, look at it better.
I have some carrots.
normally don't hide it.
Now, you say leases, so it's not land that you own, but land that you lease.
Land that we lease because
That's
we
what they
don't
don't like
own
Cameron
yes or
anymore.
enough
That
to
really-
be able to hunt the alligators. In other words, people, if they own the land, they will use it for hunting. In other words, whether you own or lease land, you can hunt the alligators the same.
So if you own the land, you still have the same, get so many
look at that.
tags.
Right, right.
Whether you own it or lease it.
Right, yes, sir, the same amount. In other words, it's the same acreage. If someone owns 500 acres or if someone leases 500 acres, they get issued the same one tags. In other words, you're short of 1 square acre, you get 0 tags. In other words, you need a minimum of 500. My father leases 11,000 square acres of marsh and swamp combines. He leases more than what the length of this bayou is. Now, the land that he leases is off of that Highway 307 from the drawbridge all the way through Highway 90 when you're traveling back to New Orleans. That's all of my father's alligator leases. A curb is stretched that every year, but on different sides. So you're looking at 4 different ways to cut away that skin. So it's I would say, an easy way to solve the problem of most of the poaching. I mentioned about the brown feathers. When you come across an immature one, they look totally different from what we're seeing here. They're same size, but the feathers are brown instead of gray. In this area, and in fact throughout Louisiana, we have yellow crown and the black crown like we're seeing here. Spanish magnet. Now, we do not speak Spanish at all. My father speaks, basically speaks Spanish more because of his family or someone that made a living off of the land. Now, there are certain parts of Louisiana you would classify that as being different things, such as a Creole, Acadian, and Cajun. Depending on what part of Louisiana. All of the southern part from about New Orleans, including New Orleans, on down, all the way to the Gulf, it's all of their Cajun. Tags. When you place the tag that you are issued on the skin of the alligator, it can no longer be taken off the skin of the alligator unless you break it. Or you have to cut a hole through the skin of the tail, slide one end of the tag, snap the opposite end on, and then it's left on the skin until it's shipped out of the country, and it's cut off and thrown away. And the tag, you also have to buy them, but it's a small price compared to the money that you make with them. It's only $4 for one tag. That $4 tag can make a person maybe $1,500, $2,000. But in Louisiana was 25,000 alligators caught in only 30 days. Now, the year before was 22,000, and the year before, going back to 1987, it was about 18 or 19,000. So there's about a 3,000 increase of alligators every year. So this year should be about 28,000. But it's not counting what is sold year-round at the alligator farms. In other words, if you farm them at a farm, different kind of farm and raise them, sell the tags. If you decide not to use them, or if for some reason you have a problem with filling the tags with catching alligators, the remaining tags that you have left once the 30-day season expires, we do the scanning, the hunting, everything all sell. In other words, people will use all this. This would all be used by different people that live in this area.
20/20 vision to be able to see those alligators.
This one I noticed when I was coming in the canal on the opposite side, so I kept looking around to see if we could find some larger ones. So this is the only one we've seen so far in here. But I noticed one of that. Down, when I was coming in. Go out there, look at their eyes at night, and if you see one, you can put out a little cork or something in the water to mark that area, or just a pole, and you can come out during the daylight hours and set a line to fish or to shoot if you see them. But here, only during the day, at night, you don't shoot. People stick to the rules pretty much? Yeah, here, you have to patrol the area. They write the Louisiana quite very carefully. There's all patrols. The strictest in their own is with this low caliber rifle, 22 caliber or 30 or 35 caliber. Really, when it comes to shooting an alligator, it's not so much what type of gun you use, it's really where you shoot. Because an alligator only has one soft area on its hand, and right back of its eyes, that's where its brain is located. If you shoot an alligator anywhere else, even with a high-powered rifle, the chances are the land will not even penetrate through the skull, it will just break open the skin, and what will happen is the land just falls off in the water, or it'll come back right to lines that are used to catch the alligator. When we place place the line out on the branch of the tree. Once it's tied, you in around the branch. You leave the opposite end, the hook here, and the bait, which is normally a fish, about 3 feet out of the water. The reason why we leave it out of the water is to catch a larger alligator. What happens is when the alligator's finding the bait, if it's a very small alligator, about maybe 2 or 3 foot in length, it cannot stretch up its neck far enough out of the water to reach the bait, so you catch a larger alligator. Because mainly they're trying to catch a large one. You can adjust at any height. 3 feet would increase your chances of catching a large alligator. Caused by the shallow water. She couldn't use something this large. The second and third picture would show when the line looks with a fish on the hook. Now you can see how it doesn't take a very large bait. What attracts the alligator to the line is really the smell of the bait, the smell of the fish. This on the water we're seeing in the picture would all be duckweed now. Duckweed will be what we're seeing close to the water. Looks like an algae, but that's a plant that's eaten by fish in the water. The reason why I'm back in the boat, excuse me, I'm going to point out I had noted in that thick layer of duckweed, look through the opening of these trees and off to the left where that no trespassing sign is, look a few yards in the back of it and off to the left of it, and you can see Now, when we traveled through here the first time, this is where we had seen that black-brown night heron, and this alligator was not out, so it just came out in the time that we passed by it in the last 5 or 10 minutes. I'll pass around the picture. You can on the side, though, it would just cripple them. Whereas if you cripple them, they become more dangerous because their tail, you have to be very careful for the tail of the alligator. If the tail hits any part of your body, even after they're completely dead, it can break any part of your body. Because the tail on an alligator stays moving, it continues to move even after the alligator's dead for maybe 3 or 4 hours. And to keep the tail from moving, you have to cut the neck of the alligator to paralyze the alligator. The main nerve that controls the alligator's tail is paralyzed to the tail. Going out sport fishing near or in Lake Buff. There's little man-made canals right near the lake, and they also fish in those canals. So he's probably going out sport fishing. The weekend, that's when you have the sport fishing out here. The weekday, you don't see any out here. Weekday. The weekend, quite a bit of them.
You like doing this?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay.
No, he doesn't because he doesn't like it.
Get over here.
Okay.
Okay. Still looking for alligators, and I hope to find us some more.
What are you doing with this axe in your hand?
Well, Melanie is showing my father here using a hatchet to getting ready now. Not doing it yet, but getting ready to cut the neck of the alligator to paralyze the tail. In other words, not every alligator you'll have to do such a thing. Now, no matter if they're only 1 foot in length or 18 feet in length, all alligators have an 18 teeth. Even if they're only a foot in length, they already have all 18 teeth. In other words, if you have an alligator's jaws closed, you can clamp it shut very easily with one hand, and that alligator will not be able to open its jaw. But you would also have to be very careful for the tail now. The tail can swing around and get you from the side, or even if you're standing in front of that alligator, the tail can still swing around and get to you.
Did you go that far?
Oh, yes. Very, very dangerous. Now, an alligator, to continue explaining more about it, when you're looking at them, if you wanted to determine the full size of the small hill of dirt, I'll just point this out through these very thin layers of trees on the right side of the bayou. This is a man-made levee here also. This was used for the same purpose of the canals being passed by earlier. The levees were also used in some areas to flip the trees over to get them into the bayou. And you can see here how it's built on the edge of the bayou. It doesn't go straight into the swamp. It probably would burn the tree. It would break the tree for sure in half. But although we were passed by trees that I didn't point out, which were hit by lightning, and point it out, because sometimes I will pass by something and I see it. Here's a young one.
That's
here.
about a year old.
Year, about a year, not quite a year and a half.
Take it in there and get them.
It'd be safe to say a year. I won't overestimate the age of it. I'd say a year.
And that film, they showed the bags.
Ground large enough for them to enter, then they enter the holes and they stay there an average of 2 weeks before they surface for a few hours of air. In other words, alligators, when they're below the water hibernating, their heartbeat slows down to its slowest point of where it beats only once every 2 minutes. That's why the alligator is capable of staying 2 weeks below the water. In other words, it's still breathing when it's below the water, but the oxygen that's taken into its body is drawn in from the water and through the bottom of the jaw, through the skin.
They can stay under 2 weeks.
Usually see more than this. That may be caused by the boat traffic we had earlier. That scares sometimes.
So out of 50 eggs hatched,
They come out,
approximately 8 will live.
getting ready to nest on trees.
8 will make it to maturity.
Out here, this is something where I'm sure it's the same for other areas. You can come out here 5 times in only 1 day and see something continuously differently. You can have a different tour every time you come out here in 1 day. Such as in a form, what hatches out of this, if you have an average of 45 eggs that are laid, usually every one of the 45 eggs will hatch. It's not like out here where you have 5 or 10 that do not hatch. When all of the 45 eggs hatch, every one of those alligators will survive because there's nothing to eat them like out here.
You don't have a problem with overrunning the population then, huh?
The alligator has to thicken. In captivity, since they grow almost 3 feet in 1 year, the skin stays very thin, and they're worth about $20 less a foot. If we get $67 a foot for an alligator out here in the swamp, we get about what you're looking at, about $27 a
What's the
foot.
snake over there?
You saw a snake over there.
There's like the little stripes on it.
Yeah, I think I saw the
Oh, I see, I see.
face sticking out.
And that's called a what?
The diamondback water snake. Yes. Up to the bayou, we're straight in front of the round building with a pointed tin roof. What we are seeing here will be used by the duck hunters to sleep in overnight during the hunting season. In other words, no one lives in here permanently. It's only maybe for about 2 or 3 days at a time.
This is bigger than 10 roof, I guess.
You prefer this one? Which one? Right here.
Oh,
Here,
the
I'll
bus
point
still
out this
there.
is also, you can see some of your little trappers' houses, the homes that are used by your trappers here. Two green ones and a little red with deep off to the back where I left the boat. And you can see the actual trapper. Lake concentrate. There's little clamshells, but they dig them out there and they dredge them out.
Okay, make your exit.
Get back on.
Make your exit. Wave.
Sell it like by the square yard.
Did you like it?
Yes.
All right, great.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go back around there to see the alligator farm.
Where's the alligator?
Okay, we're heading over there now.
Yeah.
You know where it's at?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a bad idea.
Well, yeah.
What you doing, ladies?
Watching this guy beg for it.
And I bet you're liking that too, right?
This is really pretty animal.
Uh-oh.
Something this big.
Is that right? Yeah.
A little bit later in the year, we'll come across something this big.
Well, yeah, you said these hibernate longer.
Yeah.
Do you do any?
Is that ours alligator?
Fire. All right.
You get the run of the yard, don't do
In this town, the little city. Look at that Premier Bank it is. It's nice. There's swimming pool in this hotel.
True Southern home.
Check this one out.
You have to own a car like that to have a house like this. Gorgeous. Yeah, it's beautiful.
The town.
Some more beautiful homes from Thibodaux, Louisiana. Beautiful, beautiful home.
A lot of tourists in there.
This was the first church built in this area until it burnt down, and then this church replaced it.
Church in the Philippines, we call that apple. They have a setup like that, but Jesus Christ was old word. And the church was so old, it was half the church old. What they did to it is they put it in a glass like that you could see his face was full. The other person that needs help would just go there, or you pray for them and get it.
Before the Civil War. And if you'll notice, it's built for the parishioners to sit here, the other half. Also, you can notice the kneeling benches here. These were made so that the ladies in their hoop skirts could kneel. And we do what we call here the St. John squat. Because you can only...
That's me too.
1844, something like that.
It was built in 1844?
I think it was like that. It's on the plaque. I keep forgetting. There's some modifications. It was built without the nave originally, and this was an open porch originally back here. But the nave, the altar area was added.
This is the way they used to bury him in the olden days, above ground. I guess mainly because of all the rain and stuff they have down here. Again, this is in Thibodaux, Louisiana.
Except when we went there, you can hardly see her, see the little house because of the grass. The way they buried my brother was like this, and I couldn't find him when I went back home to
Oh, you know, when we were in Natchez, we would...
Notice how far back this goes, all the way back down to 1784.
They can,
after
someone died in their family, they opened the door and they just kind of put it in there again.
And this is how they bury them down south, above ground, in tombs. Here just didn't like it.
Yeah.
So this is time to leave.
They moved out.
Or Dracula does live.
Melanie. You're the one that found it. You tell them about it. No. They're pretty much the same, too. It's thrown away. Gee, I forgot to bring Harry some flowers.
Moving film here, you know, move around.
The place is just dead. You know, we came over here, nobody's up at all, and
Well, just think of it this way. At least they can't talk back to you, right?
that's right. That's true. Used to be an old shoe factory here. 300 souls were lost. It was done by some heel.
Mike.
Here, let me get a shot of me. Yeah.
They are so beautiful.
And here's our tour guide.
Is there somebody in the window up top, in the middle window?
You gotta pay attention.
Turn it on, dude.
My name is Melanie, and I will be your tour guide. I'd like to begin the story of Oak Alley with a history of the trees out front and of the plantation itself. Historical records tell us that in the late 1690s or early 1700s, an unknown French settler chose this as his home site. He built a rustic cabin where this mansion now stands and planted the double avenue of trees you see in the front of the home. There are 14 oaks on each side of the avenue for a total of 28. The trees are approximately 80 feet apart from each other and 100 feet across from each other, and they do extend a quarter of a mile from the front of the home to the river road. The trees are live oaks, which means they're evergreens, so they're native to South Louisiana and they thrived, but we have no further word of the French settler. We do know that in 1837, a wealthy Creole from New Orleans named Jacques Telesphore Roman chose this as the site of his summer home, which he and his new bride Selina would have built. They chose as their architect, Mr. Gilbert Joseph Pellier, who also happened to be Selina's father. I think that had a little to do with the decision. The same man who designed the famous Café du Monde in New Orleans. Mr. Pellier designed this house in classic Greek revival. There are 28 columns surrounding the house in keeping with the 28 trees in front. The columns are 8 feet in circumference and they're made of solid brick. To make them rounded in shape, the bricks were baked in pie-shaped molds in ovens here on the plantation, and the columns were then covered with plaster. The walls of this house are also 16 inches thick, solid brick throughout, with plaster on both sides. On the first floor, the ceilings are 12.5 feet tall. On the second floor, they're 10.5 feet tall. Doors and windows were placed opposite each other for maximum cross ventilation, and this veranda extends approximately 13 feet from the walls of the house and completely encircles it, which would keep the home in shade all or most of the day. Remember, this was a summer home for the Romans, not their permanent residence. They were Creoles, and the word Creole comes from the Spanish word criollo, and it means native born, but of European parents. The Creoles have always been a very important part of New Orleans society. They would live the bulk of the year in the Vieux Carré section of the city, and they would come upriver in the summer to these homes. Jacques died in 1848 of tuberculosis, but his widow Selina continued coming with their children. Selina was a true aristocratic Creole lady. She had been born into a wealthy family. She married into a wealthy family. She was quite good at entertaining and knowing how to dress and at knowing how to spend money. Unfortunately, she didn't know how to make money. And while this plantation was not making much money, Selina was still spending lots of money. The Civil War and Reconstruction occurred, during which time Oak Alley was not earning much money. Selina was still spending. By the time Selina died in 1866, Oak Alley was deeply in debt. Her surviving son, Henri, did everything he could to save the plantation for his family, but his mother's debts were overwhelming. He was finally forced to hold a public auction, at which time he sold this house and 1,300 acres of land for $32,800 to cover his mother's expenses. The plantation then went through a series of unsuccessful owners until in 1881 it was purchased by Mr. Antoine Sabral. Mr. Sabral was a wealthy sugar farmer, and for the 24 years he owned Oak Alley, it was once again a prosperous plantation. Mr. Sabral was getting old and his health was failing, so in 1905 he also decided to sell. Once again, O'Galley went through a series of unsuccessful owners, the last of whom abandoned the house, boarded it up, and left it to face the elements. It remained that way until in 1917, when it was purchased by Jefferson Davis Hardin Jr. Mr. Hardin wanted more than anything to restore O'Galley to its former beauty, but because the house had been abandoned, it was infested with a colony of bats. So he couldn't move into the mansion. He instead moved himself and his family into the ticket office, which was formerly the Plantation jail, and this is where he lived while he renovated the mansion. To get rid of the colony of bats, he burned sulfur in the house for days on end. I don't think Satan would have taken a walk through O'Galley then. It was also Mr. Hardin who twice went to court against the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They build and maintain the 40-foot levee system that protects this area from floods of the river. Twice they wanted to widen the levee. In doing so, they were going to take the last oak on each side of the alley. Mr. Hardin had spent much tender, loving care, as well as money on these trees. He wasn't about to let anyone take any of the oaks, so he took them to court and stopped them both times, saving all 28 trees. Ironically, for Mr. Hardin, though, it was also a court battle that ended his ownership of Oak Alley, because while he lived in the ticket office renovating the mansion, he had cattle that wandered the grounds. One afternoon, one of his cows went for a walk on the railroad track, and it caused the train to derail, and a very expensive lawsuit followed. Financially, it was too much for Mr. Hardin to bear, and in 1924, after 7 years of ownership, during which time he never did live in the mansion, Mr. Hardin surrendered the property to Whitney Bank of New Orleans. In 1925, Oak Alley was purchased for the seventh and the final time by Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Stewart of New Orleans. He was a wealthy retired cotton broker, and they purchased this plantation. Over the next several years, they would spend an additional 60 renovating, remodeling, modernizing, as well as bringing in antiques common to the mid-1800s, so that Oak Alley would once again look as it had for the Romans. Before her death in 1972, Mrs. Stewart created a nonprofit foundation to ensure that upon the event of her death, the ownership of this house and the surrounding 25 acres would revert to the foundation, and the home would remain open to the public for tours and for events to be held here, such as weddings, receptions, banquets, etc. So the house as we're seeing it today is as it was left by the Stewarts. While inside, we ask that you please do not smoke, do not touch. You're welcome to take pictures, but no flash attachment inside the house. Please remain together as a group at all times. If you have any questions, stop me and ask. If I know the answer, I'll be glad to tell you, and if I don't, I'll tell you I don't know. The radiator. This is from Mr. Andrew Stewart, the last resident owner of this plantation. During the tour of the home, I'm going to compare it from when it was built by the Romans, from 1837 to 39, to when it was purchased by the Stewarts in 1925. This is where you will see the most changes that have occurred within the mansion, beginning with the red bedroom directly in front of us. This room was not in existence when the Romans in the 1800s, but in very poor condition when the Stewarts purchased this house. Rather than renovate it, every other room in this mansion will have a fireplace. This bedroom was primarily designed to give Mrs. Stewart a place to rest in the afternoons. When he purchased Oak Alley, he was suffering from a severe heart condition. His doctors had recommended that he rest in the afternoon. Since his master bedroom was on the second floor, that is what this room was designed for. You note that the beds are very short. The average Creole person of the mid-1800s was 5'4" or less, so they didn't need long beds. Same thing about the doorknobs in Oak Alley. Despite the height of the doors, look where the doorknobs are. Same reason. If you're 5'4" or less, they're just perfect. The squared staircase was also the scene of a tragedy for the Roman family. Their daughter Louise was coming downstairs one afternoon to greet one of her beaux, wearing, of course, her big bouffant skirts and hoops. She got part of the way down the stairs, and she realized the young man below her was intoxicated. And, being a Southern lady, she was just highly insulted that he comes calling like this. So she turned around to run back upstairs, and when she did, she tripped over one of her hoops. It broke and it pierced into her leg. The wound turned to gangrene, so she lost her leg. She lost her both. She lost her position in society as an eligible young woman for marriage. She later entered the Carmelite Order of Nuns in St. Louis, and years later came back to New Orleans and founded the Carmelite Order of New Orleans. So since you can't see the stairs, we'll tell you the story. Are of Mr. Stewart's Scottish mother and father, and the all-portrait here over the sofa is of Mrs. Julia Kaufman. Mrs. Kaufman is Mrs. Stewart's younger sister. Their mother, Molly, photographed here, died as a young woman. So Josephine Armstrong Stewart helped to raise her younger brothers and sisters. That's why Julia is very important to her, and there are 2 portraits of Julia in this house. This one in the hallway directly above. Julia Kaufman is 102 years old. She celebrated her birthday on February 5th of this year, and she still lives in New Orleans.
Wow.
The other photograph here is of Major John Armstrong. He was Mrs. Stewart's father and owner of the famous Armstrong cattle ranch in Texas. That's why when the Stewarts owned Oak Alley, besides it being a working sugar plantation, it also boasted fine herds of Santa Gertrudis that grazed on the Oak Alley. Major Armstrong was also one of the first Texas Rangers. You like... Romans built the house, would have been their master bedroom. It was common in antebellum days for the master to have his bedroom downstairs for easily being reached by the servants as well as for security reasons. But when the Stewarts purchased the house, adding the red bedroom downstairs, they didn't want this room as a master bedroom. So they made this room their living room, and the Romans' master bedroom, which is directly above this, or was the Romans' living room, became the Stewarts' master bedroom. The French doors surrounding this house are made of cypress, and they are original to the home. When you look through the panes of glass, you get a wavy, distorted image. Like the bricks, the glass was made here on the plantation. 95% of the glass in this house is the original Oak Alley glass. If you look into the second pane above the doorknob in the back, you'll see the signature of Anne Cabral. She was one of Mrs. Cabral's daughters, and when she received her engagement ring, she wanted to make sure it was a real diamond, so she etched her name into the door. The little rosettes above all doors and windows are made of plaster and horsehair, and they are original to the home. The way the curtains drag on the floor dates back to an antebellum custom called puddling. If the owner of a plantation could afford to put all that extra material on the floor, certainly they were wealthy. So all wealthy plantation owners puddled their curtains on the floor. The mirror in between the back doors is called the 20 states in existence when the mirror was fashioned. Because it's convex in shape, it's also nicknamed the chaperone's mirror for obvious reasons. One glance into that mirror and you knew exactly what was going on in this room. The table next to me is called a tilt-top tea table. When the ladies were seated here entertaining their guests, they put the tabletop down, lock it into position, and serve refreshments. But when tilted up like this in front of the fire, it protected them from a very embarrassing situation. Antebellum ladies frequently wore a heavy foundation underneath their makeup that was primarily composed of beeswax. This would take hours to apply and would give them the opportunity to hide any scars or blemishes or even the skull-tired cheekbones. Well, if you're seated here entertaining guests and you have a beeswax foundation on your face and there's a roaring fire in the fireplace, it could be mighty embarrassing while your face melts off until you laugh. To protect themselves, they just tilted the table. It would shield their face from the heat of the fire and save them much embarrassment. The Italian marble in the fireplaces is the original Italian marble. 2 things were imported to build Oak Alley. The marble for the fireplaces, and that was originally on the dining room floor, and slate that was originally on the roof, were imported from Italy. Everything else was made here on the plantation or gotten from surrounding areas, making this a true Louisiana antebellum home. And the term antebellum refers to the period in history following the Federalist period and immediately preceding the Civil War. The pastel portrait over the piano is of Josephine Armstrong Stewart, the last and the longest mistress of Oak Alley, living here for 46 years. The piano was manufactured in 1858 by John Broadwood and Sons of London, England, and donated to the foundation in 1985. We still use it today for events held in the house that would require music, such as weddings, Christmas caroling, receptions. The 2 paintings flanking the mirror in the back are from a 1900s Louisiana Impressionist painter named A.J. Driscoll. The one on the right is called Sunrise over the Mississippi. This one is called Sunset. They both appear very foggy and hazy. Mr. Driscoll was an Impressionist painter, and sunrise and sunset on the Mississippi usually are foggy and hazy. Are there any questions in this room?
Yes, what does it cost to rent this place for a wedding?
This room has always been the dining room. It didn't matter who owned the house. This room never changed in its function. What did change was the location of the kitchen. For antebellum owners, the kitchen was separate from the house beyond that courtyard because cooking was done over live fire. So there was too much danger of the house catching on fire, cooking odors and noises. When the Stewarts purchased this house, through that swinging door there is a butler's pantry. They remodeled part of that butler's pantry into a modern kitchen. We don't show it to our guests because we use it as an office during the day. The two mirrors are called pier mirrors. They're over 100 years old, and Miss Stewart had them imported from France. They not only lightened and brightened the room and made it appear bigger, they also gave antebellum ladies a discreet chance to walk past the mirror and check their petticoats and slips. The painting, the painting on the back wall is of Elizabeth Bennet Strange. Miss Strange is one of the Stewarts' many nieces. The Stewarts' marriage was never blessed with any children of their own, so their nieces and nephews were very important to them, and they were frequent guests here at the plantation. The tea service dates back to the early 1800s. It's the Stewart family heirloom. It is solid sterling silver and was a wedding gift to Mrs. Stewart from her grandmother. Where we see this waterford crystal chandelier over the table, the Romans and other antebellum owners would have used the big fan that's in the stand in the back. It's called a chicoire or punka fan. That fan would have been coupled with heavy material or leather, suspended from the ceiling by a heavy cord, which would have then run across and down into one corner. A young servant boy or girl would have then sat or stood in the corner, gently pulling the cord up and down, swinging that big fan very slowly back and forth across the table, shooing away the flies and as cool as possible. We know from records left by Selina Roman that when she had guests for meals in the summer, she would have a big tub of ice in the center of her dining room table, and with the chicoire fan above it, it was like 1800s air conditioning. The ice came downriver from St. Louis on riverboats. Selina had 200 or 300 pounds a week delivered to Oak Alley Plantation. I know that's where the money went.
Question. Waterford, what year?
I have no idea. It was put in here by around 1930s by the Stewarts. Right. He is an ancestor of the Stewart family, and it's a portrait that was just handed down through generations. The china behind you is English Copenspole, and Miss Stewart had it hand painted to match the upholstery on the Duncan Fife dining room chairs. You notice the clocks in Oak Alley, they're all stopped at 7:30. That's in honor of Mrs. Stewart's death. She died at 7:30 a.m. October 3rd, 1972, at the age of 93. In her honor, they stopped the clocks in the house and never restarted them. This black and white photo of Oak Alley was taken in 1958 when something very unusual happened for Louisiana. It snowed about 3 inches and it stayed on the ground for several days. And when that happens in Louisiana, we take pictures. Miss Stewart also requested that the picture remain on display until such time as there would be considerably more snowfall, so it stayed right where it is. Any questions? All right, if you follow me to the bottom, I would like to tell you that the floors downstairs are not the original floors. During the years this house was abandoned, livestock roamed into the house. So the original floors were chipped, cracked, and broken. This floor, the living room, and the red bedroom were brick like the veranda. This one was black and white checkerboard marble. But because they were chipped, cracked, and broken, the Stewarts chose to put the pine wood floors on top of the existing floors. The two bedrooms at the top of the stairs are right across the hall from each other, so I'll tell you about them down here and let you view them as you go up. The one on the left is called the Peach Guest Bedroom. This is where young ladies over the age of 15 who were not married and visiting the house would have stayed. The beds in this room are called rolling pin beds. They date back to the early 1800s, and they were purchased from the Ursuline Convent in New Orleans. They're called rolling pins because part of the headboard was detachable. The servants would lift it off in the morning, and like a giant rolling pin, they would literally roll out the mattresses. Mattresses were stuffed with Spanish moss or feathers, and after a night's sleep, they would be quite lumpy. So the bed closest to the door has been rolled out and flattened for you. We left the other one lumpy so you could see what it would look like. Across the hall is the second bedroom added by the Stewarts. It's called the children's bedroom. Even though they had no children of their own, their nieces and nephews visited here frequently. There's a double bed in this room called a half-teaster bed. The term half-teaster implies half of a canopy. It has a decorative rosewood finish, and it's believed to have been the bed that Mrs. Stewart was actually born in. There's a Jenny Lynn baby's crib in the room also, which dates back to the 1800s, and it's the Stewart family heirloom. A blue and white upholstered couch is against the wall closest to the hallway, and it's called a courting couch. It's very high on one end, low on the other end. The young man would have sat at the end that was high, the young lady at the end that was low because of her big skirts. However, a courting couch would never, ever have been in a children's bedroom. You didn't court in a children's bedroom. We just put it there so you could see what it would look like. There's also a blue and white upholstered chair, which is called the nanny's chair. It was the job of the nanny to sit up at night, watch over the children as they slept, and make sure that no harm came to them. Remember, your French doors would have been wide open for ventilation. There were no screens until the 1940s. Therefore, anything that walked, crept, crawled, or flew could get into the children. So the nanny watched over them as they slept and made sure that no harm came to them. Are there any questions? All right, if you please follow. Each guest bed is on your left, children's bed is on your right. Oh, it's cold up here. You see the rolling pin. You'll also see the lumpy mattress on the other side. And of course, those little porcelain pots in those nice little cabinets. They were taken in 1958. The top one shows the Mississippi Delta Queen docking in front of the plantation, which it still does occasionally. It's on their itinerary to stop here. Also, the middle one shows Mrs. Stewart's herds of Santa Gertrudis grazing on the Oak Alley. In the black frame here, this is Spanish moss, what Spanish moss looks like after it has been cleaned and dried and cured, ready to be stuffed into a mattress or furniture. And this is a book press. Louisiana has always had an exceedingly bad problem with humidity. It would cause pages of books to wrinkle. So they'd simply flatten out the pages of the book, close the cover, put it in the book press, and then tighten the pressure and restore the book. Also very useful for pressing flowers. We'll continue in the center of the hallway are called false doors. When the Romans built Oak Alley, these doors led to parlors and bathing areas. When the Stewarts purchased the house, they didn't need parlors and bathing areas. What they did need were closets and modern bathrooms. So they left the false doors, and behind them, they have now added closets and modern baths on each side of the hallway. One of the ways a house was taxed in the 1800s was based upon the number of rooms it contained, and a closet was counted as a room. That's why antebellum homes do not contain closets. They used a piece of furniture called an armoire in place of a closet. It wasn't a closet, so you couldn't tax it. The third floor of Oak Alley we do not show to our guests because that one stairway is our only entrance and exit, so St. James Parish fire codes prohibit us bringing groups up. There are 2 more bedrooms and a bath on the left, and the remainder is attic storage space. The false doors also proved to be a historical record of the house, beginning with the signature of J.T. Roman and the dates 37, 38, and 39. George Swaney, his master builder, continuing down this door and on to the next door, ending with Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Stewart. Different people who owned or worked on the house had actually signed the doors. The inset map dates back to 1858 and shows plantations along the Mississippi River from Natchez to New Orleans. You will note that for the most part, the tracts of land are long, slender tracts. That's because in the 1800s, property owners wanted land that fronted onto the river. Well, if everybody wants riverfront property, you can have depth to your land, but you are not going to have much width. That's why they're shaped the way they are. The ones marked off in yellow and white, like Oak Alley, are some of the plantations that are today still open to the public. The second portrait of Julia Kaufman is this one above the sofa, done when she was a young girl of 15. The small table on the opposite end is a combination sewing and writing table of the early 1800s. This one, a drop-leaf game table. This silver loving cup was won in 1910 by Andrew Stewart at a golf tournament. And the print above is an 1800s Gautier print of the rear of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. If you'd like to look through that doorway or this one, I'll tell you about the Roman's living room, which became the Stewart's master bedroom. You'll note in the ceiling there is a very elaborate medallion that is hand-carved in plaster and horsehair. It's original to the house, and it did have a canvas chandelier hanging from it. The 4-poster bed is Louisiana original antique done in pineapple design. In America, a pineapple is a symbol of wealth and hospitality. And in the South, where we pride ourselves on Southern hospitality, it's quite appropriate that we carve a pineapple into a bedpost. The bed on the opposite end of the room is called a sleigh bed. It was used by the ladies like a day bed, and the mattress is stuffed with Spanish moss. The dress on the mannequin is over 130 years old and was a honeymoon gift to Mrs. Stewart's grandmother from her grandfather, purchased from D.H. Holmes in New Orleans. The dress is made of satin and lace. When Mrs. Stewart died in 1946 at the age of 74, Mrs. Stewart no longer wanted to stay in the master bedroom. She chose to move across the hallway into the opposite room, which she decorated in her favorite color of lavender. That is where she stayed from 1946 until her death in 1972. The photograph in the hallway above the lamp, right here outside the door, was taken of Mrs. Stewart on the morning of her 86th birthday. In the glassed-in case, you will see pictures or you'll see pages from guest books. Mrs. Stewart began the tradition back in the 1930s of keeping a guest book at O'Galley. You'll see signatures such as Mrs. Woodrow Wilson, Princess Margaret of Great Britain, James Caan, Jason Robards, Burt Reynolds, and other famous people who have visited this home over the years. You'll also see the ghost picture of O'Galley that was taken by a tourist several years ago of that mannequin and mirror in the blue bedroom. When he had it developed, he sent a copy back to the plantation because when he had it developed, the mannequin had a young girl's head, long hair, yet reflected in the mirror in the same picture, there is no head on the mannequin. It's in the bottom right-hand corner, but the mannequin was at a different angle when he took that picture. This home has also been used in movies. The remake of The Long Hot Summer with Don Johnson and Sybil Shepherd was filmed here. If you remember the Betty Davis classic of Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, the exterior shots were filmed at O'Galley. The interior were done at Homer's house in Burnside. Or if you're a soap opera fan of Days of Our Lives, Bo and Hope's Wedding and Honeymoon was filmed here in 1984. If you're familiar with the TV series called This Old House, they recently filmed a segment on antebellum homes, which in our area will be shown on March 21st. Also, BMW has done a commercial here, so has Lincoln Continental, South Central Bell, City National Bank, Blue Note Wines, Davy Tree Company, and 17 Magazine just finished the fashion layout of prom clothing, which features O'Galley in their advertisements. Any questions in the house?
What was that movie Don Johnson and Fox?
Sybil Shepherd did a remake of The Long Hot Summer that was filmed entirely at O'Galley. We'll continue on to the gallery, if you have no questions in the house.
You.
Well, you get camera?
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking to you then. If everyone will continue here in the center. Oh, really? You're looking at the beautiful oak alley, the 28 live oak trees that this plantation is so famous for. These trees are approximately 300 years old, having been planted in the 1690s by the French settlers. Davy Tree Company experts tell us that makes them middle-aged. Their life expectancy here is easily 600 years. The trees did have Spanish moss growing in them, but Miss Stewart didn't like it. She had the trees chemically treated so the Spanish moss wouldn't grow. What you do see on the branches and trunks is a type of fern called resurrection fern. Right now it appears brown and dead, but if it were to rain, it would come back green and beautiful. That's why they call it resurrection fern. The two great big stones you see below on each side of the sidewalk are millstones. They're original to the plantation and were used by the slaves to grind corn and wheat to make flour. The great big cast iron kettles are also original to the plantation. They too were used by the slaves which boiled syrup to make sugar. Oak Alley has always been, and still is today, a working sugar plantation. The field you saw as you drove into the ticket office is part of the sugarcane crop of Oak Alley, owned by the Stewart's nieces and nephews and leased out to local farmers. When you go downstairs, if you have a few minutes of your time, walk off on the west side of the house, and you're going to come to a small wooden footbridge. Cross it, and then veer off to the right. You're going to come to a small cemetery on the ground. That's where Mr. and Mrs. Stewart and their dog are buried. Remember, they had no children. They were quite fond of the dog. So you're going to see Andrew Stewart, Josephine Stewart, and Sandy the dog. The porch railing is cypress, and it is original to the home, as are shutters and doors. The color scheme is also the original color scheme. Like puddling the curtains, this was an additional sign of an owner's wealth. If you could afford to paint your plantation home in colors, and not just white, you were wealthy. So J.T. Roman painted his green, pink, and white, and he left him no doubt as to how wealthy he was. Notice as you walk the gallery that it slopes to the outside. Mr. Pelier designed it intentionally to do this so that incoming rainwaters would simply wash off. We'll continue on the east side of the buildings outlying this plantation, flanking it on this side and on the other side. They've already dug up part of the other building, and they know that it was 30 feet wide by 60 feet long, and it had a center fireplace. And they're not sure yet what the purpose of the building was, whether it was a garçonniere, which is where the young men would have stayed who were not married, whether it was an office, or the overseer. They're not sure what the function of the building was, and I'm sure that's what she's doing on this side now. You see the little markers? They know that there was a building somewhere in this area, so they're doing excavations to find out what it was. They said it would take about 3 to 5 years to excavate entirely and ascertain what these buildings had been. So if you want to come back about 5 years from now, we'll have a lot more to tell you. The shed you see behind the trees was built by the stewards over the site of what we believe to have been the original kitchen. The walkway coming to the house is nicknamed Whistler's Walk. The reason they called it Whistler's Walk is when the servants left the kitchen carrying trays of food to the dining room, they had to whistle the whole way to assure the mistress and her guests that they weren't sampling food along the way.
Oh, I'll be darned.
The boxwood hedges were planted by the stewards to form an English formal garden, and the plantation bell that was rung to signal the beginning of our tour is our original plantation bell, and it was cast in 1848 in Pittsburgh. When the Romans built Oak Alley, they had 114 slaves living here. 100 were assigned to the fields, garden, and yards. 14 were assigned to the house. It's a lot of people to call if you want them to come running in a hurry. Had to have an effective way of doing it, and that is what the bell provided. Today, we simply use it to mean we're beginning a tour. The home you see in the corner, left-hand corner, is the original overseer's cottage. Today, it is the private residence of the director of the foundation, and as such, it is not part of our open tour. The tallest tree directly in front of us is the magnolia tree. It does bear the state flower of Louisiana every spring. So Jim gets rid of his little now. These were planted by the Romans. That makes these oaks about 150 years old. So we call the ones in the front the middle-aged oaks. Those are the baby oaks. If you were to continue down this road, on the left-hand side, that is where our restaurant and gift shop are located. The restaurant is open until 3, the gift shop is open until 5. Also, with regards to the oak trees, the ones in the front were approximately that size when Jacques Roman built this house in 1837. If you were to continue down the road towards the cane fields in the back, that's where the slave cottages were located. There were 20, 10 on each side of the road, and they faced each other. But in 1965, they were destroyed by Hurricane Betsy. So we can tell you about them, but there is nothing left to show you. This does conclude our tour of Oak Alley Plantation Home, and I would like to thank you for stopping by and visiting with us today. It is through visits like yours that a home like Oak Alley is able to stay open, and we do appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions?
If the river's out there.
Because the floor in the dining room did look like it was black and white checkerboard marble. Because it was chipped and cracked and broken, the stewards put the wood floors on top of it.
Okay, fantastic.
Got it.
Thank you. And these were one of the owners.